Hey everyone. All right, we're going to talk about fiberglassing today. You're going to notice this is a lot like tissue and dope. Just we're working with stuff that's a little bit thicker and a lot stickier. So what do we have to do here? First, you'll notice that all the pieces are cut out. I gave myself about ½ inch or so around the whole outside of it to give us room, because you're going to see how we drape it over the edge, just like with tissue and dope, and then you just sand it off to trim it. So what are the materials needed? Obviously the fiberglass. This is all 0.75 ounce cloth. We're going to be using Z-Poxy finishing resin. It works really nice. It dries reasonably quick, about 4 hours, and you can trim it and start working with the pieces if you need to, or let it sit overnight. That's mixed 1:1. Other resins like West, they're 4:1, or read the manufacturer's instructions on the mixing ratios. You don't want to just wind up with a big nasty sticky mess. Graduated mixing cups, you can pick these up off Amazon or anywhere. A couple of mixing sticks. We're going to use this as a scraper. That'll make more sense in a moment. Gloves, you don't want to get the stuff on your hands. One, because it's sticky, and two, it's not the best stuff in the world for you. Once in a while isn't going to hurt you, but yeah, you just want to avoid getting that stuff in you. And of course, lots of paper towels. You don't want to be hunting for stuff while you're in the middle of working and you got your hands a sticky mess. And that's it. So we'll get this mixed up, and then we'll start laying out the resin on a piece. Okay, we got a little bit mixed up here. Let's go ahead and we'll get started. Let's double check, make sure you're happy with all your alignments on the part. I'm going to drizzle a little bit on. This stuff goes pretty far, so you don't need to use a whole lot. This is why we're using gloves. If you're doing this by hand with your fingers, without a glove on, this would just be gross. You'd be doing nothing but making a huge mess out of yourself. Spread it out slow. Work on getting your wrinkles out. Try to not use more than what you need. Try and get everything you need on it first. If you have to add more, it's not a big deal. It just is what it is. Doesn't mean you're gonna be scraping more off. The stuff's kind of expensive. The two 2-ounce bottles of this is usually around 25 bucks or so. You'd really rather not be wasting material. So like I was saying with the scraper, hopefully you can see the bead working up. You can use it to push excess around, so you don't have to add more material. Epoxy is relatively heavy, or resin rather. Let's use technical terms here. Relatively heavy compared to, say, tissue and dope finish. Correctly applied, the difference is going to be negligible as far as weight, but you can get a significant amount of strength added by glassing. That's why you'll tend to see speed guys, racers, scale guys do it, mainly because their paints respond better because they're going to be using epoxy-based paints, and epoxy-based paints don't like to bend or move around like a tissue and dope finish will allow. And just roll it over the edge. And checking out, trying to find any little bumps in the surface for air pockets trapped underneath. Just work them out, no big deal. Just like a tissue and dope finish, don't be afraid to get your fingers in there. Push this down real good. That scraper was also pushing epoxy, or resin rather, underneath as well. So we're trying to get this all the way through and stuck down real good so that the glass is bonded to the wood instead of just kind of sitting there hovering above it. This is why we have our paper towel out ready to go. You might get fibers on your fingers. Try and keep them out of your finish. And that's just one more thing you got to sand off later, so you might as well make life as easy as possible on yourself. And see how we're getting more material up and through. And wipe it off. Hope all this is in frame. Paying more attention to what I'm doing than frame here for you guys. And if you have to, put a little bit on your finger, go around the edges. And just like a tissue and dope finish, always make sure the edges stick down. It's really the same thing. It's nothing new, it's nothing different, nothing crazy. Don't work your edges too much. You'll see the fabric, or the cloth rather, start pulling apart on you. That's normal, and it happens easier with the lighter weight fabrics like this 0.75 ounce stuff. And you're not going to make this stuff do anything it doesn't want to do. Do yourself a favor, start with sheet components like this, and then to warm yourself up, and then go into other things that might have crazier curves. You'll learn how to lay the grain down. Does the grain have an impact on the final strength of it? Yes, of course it does, just like anything else. For a lot of applications, it doesn't really matter that much because you're still gaining a ton of strength. But it's something to keep in mind if you're going for an absolute all-out performance finish. This is on a trainer for my girlfriend's kid. I'm not sending any illusions here about how the life expectancy of this model or overall performance, just to get him in the air. He actually glassed the other side yesterday and did a very good job doing that. Figured it out quite nicely. All right, there's that. When you're done, just set it down. Big booger in the middle. Spread it out. And go on to your next piece. All right, do the other small pieces and then I'll come back and do a big one. Okay, all the smaller pieces are done. For the record, for the smaller pieces I did 2 cc's and 2 cc's of resin hardener for, again, this particular type of resin system. It's a 1-to-1 mix, others are different. For this, I'm going to try 3 and 3. Hopefully it's enough and I don't have to run like a maniac and mix some more. It should be enough. I had a little left over yesterday doing 4 and 4, so we'll see. But always make sure it's mixed up nice and good. As a side note, I was always told to always err on the side of a little more resin than hardener. Excess hardener tends to make it more brittle. A little extra resin, hopefully it sets up and locks up inside without making a gooey mess. Of course, if you're off by a lot, it's not going to help. But just one thing I was always told, I always try to be as accurate as possible doing this. So your mileage may vary. All right, that should be mixed up good enough. Start by trying to get it as flat as reasonable. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get stuff off of it that shouldn't be on it. The booger in the middle from the bell crank mount, this is a Sig Buster, so this is how they build it. Not too concerned about it, and you just trim away around it when you're done. And just like we did before, drizzle some on. I start spreading by hand first, and then I'll use our scraper again, just to try and get the glass stuck down a little bit first before we really start pushing and tugging and moving things around. Do your best to work from center out. This makes life easier on yourself so you don't wind up with it bunching up in the center. Working on larger surfaces like this, you're gonna make a mess. It is what it is, don't worry about it. You see how nicely the material just pushes around for you. There's a nasty shadow from my hand in the way. It'll get a little beige colored sometimes. That's just one's kind of the color of it. It's kind of got an off-white yellow kind of color to it anyways. But if you didn't clean up all the sawdust off from your sanding beforehand, you know, that of course is going to come up and through it too. Just keep pushing it out. Only mix as much as you think you're going to need for each step of this, again, because it's expensive, but you also got about only a 20-minute pop life or so out of it. And you don't want it setting up and not really doing what you need it to be doing when you're halfway through a panel. That gets kind of frustrating. And that is definitely in the lesson learned category. Once it starts to get good and stuck down, don't be afraid to push on it a bit to get done what you need to get done. Whoop. Don't do it too soon because then it'll start lifting just like that and bunch up on you. No worries, just push it back down. If you do get snags and real nasty looking parts on it, don't sweat it too much, because after this, once it's dried and we trim it, we go back over and we put another coat of resin over it to really seal the grain of the cloth. So what we're doing here is really sealing the grain of the wood, and then the second coat seals the grain of the cloth. As far as sanding this stuff, you can be pretty aggressive with it. Dave Platt put out a really nice how to use class coat, and he goes through all this whole step here too. Encourage you to check it out. I myself tend to be a little more conservative than he is with my sanding grains. I'd rather it take me a while to do it than hurry up through sanding and then wind up doing something I'm really not happy with. So when I trim it using 220 or sometimes even 320, sanding between coats. You can sand it with 180. You're not going to hurt anything. You just want to knock the shine off of it, though. You don't really want to sand through it. You definitely want to knock the shine off of it. And if you break through a little air bubble or the glass in any spots, you just touch it with a little bit of thin CA and push it down with your finger, wipe it through, and it seals right back up, and then it winds up sanding pretty much the same as the glass around it. And you don't have to worry about getting crazy highs and lows as a result of that. And that's a really forgiving system. I hope it's showing up in the video. How you can see the difference as this wets out when you're applying it, like right here. And it's kind of, when you're looking at it, it's more of a, looks like natural glass cloth, and then kind of just looks like a fuzzy. Hey, lighten up. Gosh. Sorry about that. Fearsome guard dog. That's looking pretty good. Get around here to the front. I know you're probably staring right between my fingers, that big open spot in the middle. I'm getting there. Looks like I got lucky on this mix. Got just enough in there. Of course, now I say that, I'm probably going to end up needing more. Might leave that high and just glue that down on the second coat. That might be the smart maneuver here. See how close I can get with it. Yeah, we'll just lay that down on the second one. So we'll leave this dry. I'll use a knife. My hands are all glued right now. Use a knife, cut around it, lay it down. Then the second coat, when we're sealing the grain of the cloth, we'll make sure to get that all super pretty. I'll hopefully add to this video when we get to that point. And this is something where it's really easy to make a mess, a big mess at that real quick. So you'll find that garbage bags are your best friend laying down like I did, especially if you're working on your kitchen table like I am right now. You know, it's a little cold outside, and a lot of cold outside. Let's see what happens. We'll go over this so we can get any more material to push around. You want to, on your paper, or not your paper, your board that you made for scraping this out, this was just some scrap ball, so that's all I usually use. 1/8, 3/32. 16th gets a little small, it likes to break pretty easy and snap on you right in the middle of doing something. Make sure you radius the edges on it a little bit so it doesn't grab and snag on you. Or if it does, it doesn't do it that bad. Don't just break a piece and go to town. And feel this starting to set up, starting to drag kind of hard on me. I don't know if it's showing up in this video, but you can see where I got a couple of snags in it. over on this end. It is what it is. It just takes a little bit more resin to fill it up, which yes, of course, means more weight, but it is what it is. So, the nature of the beast sort of thing. And finally, we'll just go around the edges, seal this up. If you wanted to get really fancy with this, of course you can vacuum bag. Maybe someday I'll give that a shot. Right now it's not really in the budget. Vacuum bagging done right provides much stronger, lighter component to this because you're applying pressure all over it while you're applying vacuum, which results in pressure being applied from the outside, however you want to think about it. And through the use of bleeder cloth and the rest of the process, it gets out every last bit of unrequired resin. So you only have left in there exactly what you need and nothing more. And maybe someday give that a shot. Not today. Get that to turn real pretty. Oh well. Deal with that in the second coat. This 0.75 ounce cloth is about as light as I would go. There is 0.5 ounce cloth, which of course, you know, it's lighter, it's half an ounce instead of 3/4 ounce per yard. But man, it gets really moody really quick as far as dealing with it. 0.75 can still get finicky, but it still behaves itself for the most part. Up to you what you want to use. I'm getting greedy here, causing myself more problems. This leading edge is kind of a razor. It's not going to want to turn and stick it real well because there's nothing there for it to hold on to, but I'm still trying. Forget. Ooh, get that out of there. Just go with this, just make sure it's sealed down real good all the way up to the edge. This, that's more stuff I gotta sand later. There's a big chunk of whatever this is, it keeps floating around and following me. My epoxy might be starting to cook off a little bit. I'm sure it goes without saying, this is one of those things where you want to do it where you know you're not going to be interrupted while you're doing it. It is kind of time sensitive since you're working with resins. And there we go. Fiberglassing 101, that's how you do it. I'll do the fuse. Oop. Don't get greedy with it like I am, because then you're gonna cause more problems. Once it's good enough, leave it. Stop. Leave it. So yeah, after this gets trimmed, and then the second coat is applied just like this. You drizzle a little on, you scrape it around, that fills it in. And then you treat it like any other paint finish. You sand it, prime it, spray it, and there you go. You got a pretty looking model. We'll see if we add more to this, but that's how you fiberglass. Feel free to ask any questions you got, either in the comments, or you can also find me hiding out on the Control Line Flying Facebook page. If you stumble across this without being a member there, go ahead, sign up, and ask away. There's a bunch of us on there, more than happy to answer any questions you got. Thanks.